Okay. Hello, everyone. Hello, Louis.
Hello.
Hello, Sheldon. How are you?
Oh, Baruch Hashem.
Okay, we're getting into this this part of the Masechta that deals with a little bit of washing your hands and taharas and things like that. So it gets very interesting. But they're smaller dafim, so that's it's much easier. So let's begin. We're on daf. Today's daf is daf Yud Tes 19, and we're up to Yud Ches Samid Beis, about 5 lines from the bottom. And the Gemara begins Tana Rabbanim. Today, by the way, we're going to need some illustrations. I don't know, you don't see it so much in the Art Scroll Gemaras and other Gemaras. They didn't produce illustrations, I noticed. I found an old Pirush Chai. Somebody wrote many years ago, a small diagram of what we're going to discuss. So that's where I got it from. Tana Rabbanim, the rabbis taught, Hanoitel Yadav, if you wash your hands, we learned that you're supposed to wash your hands for bread. Or, so then, niskavein, if you knew what you were doing, you had intention that you're washing your hands to purify your hands, Yadav Taurus, then your hands become pure. Loy niskavein, and this is important, if you didn't have kavana, Yadav Tameas, your hands remain tamei. V'chein, and the same idea would hold. We learned in the Mishnah that if you want to eat kachim, right? So let's say you want to eat kachim, you want to eat a shlamim, so it's not enough to go to the sink and wash your hands, right? Noitlim. Matbilin means you stick your hands into a mikvah. So in Jerusalem, probably every hotel is going to have a mikvah when the Beis Hamikdash is going to be built, because if you're going to eat your shlamim, you have to dip your hands in the mikvah. So v'chein hamat bil yadav, those that are dipping their hands, same idea. Niskavein, if you had intention and focus on what you were doing, yadav tahiris, your hands will become pure. Loy niskavein, but if you don't have intention of what you're doing, yadav tameyais, your hands become tamei. So that's simple. But the Gemara asked, v'hatanya, we learned in a brisa that if you wash your hands, bein niskavein, whether you have kavana, bein loy niskavein, if you didn't have kavana, you didn't have kavanah of what you're doing. You're just talking to somebody else and you're just washing your hands. Yadav tahiris, your hands do become pure. So how do you resolve the differences between one brisa that says you have to have kavanah and the other brisa that says you don't have to have kavanah? Amar Rav Nachman says, Loi kash, it's not difficult. Kam, the brisa that says that you don't have to have kavanah, lachulin, if you're eating chulin, foods, that's regular plain foods that have no kedusha to it. So then if you're eating regular bread, so then you don't have to have kavanah when you're washing your hands. Kan, we go to Daf Yomi at Aleph. Kan lemaser, if you're eating ma'aser sheni, bread or fruit of ma'aser sheni, and certainly if you're eating truma, you have to have kavanah when you wash your hands. So that's the idea. For ma'aser sheni and truma, and of course kachim, everything else you must have intention and know what you're doing and have intention that you're purifying your hands to eat ma'aser sheni or truma. But for chulin, you don't need any intention at all. So the Gemara says, "Manat Tamra, what is the source?" Manat Tamra is what is the source? The chulin loy boya kavana. When you eat chulin, you don't need kavana. How do you know to be matar yourself for chulin? If you're not doing any kachim related stuff or trumas related stuff, you don't need intention. The time we learned in the Mishnah. Look at the picture over here. Hold on. Let's get the picture going. So, here it is. Here is a wave. Imagine you're standing on Atlantic Beach, and you're standing on the beach, and a wave comes and pours all water on you. Now, a wave, the ocean has a din like a mayan. A mayan is like a natural spring water, and therefore, it doesn't have to be, in order for you to become pure by having the water pour on you, it doesn't have to be like you go into a mikveh, it has to be in one place. You see, a mikveh really has to be called in one place. That's called ashboiren. It has to be like here, in order for this is a mikveh, because it's like a pool. But if it's a natural water, it could fall on you even if it's moving. So the Mishnah says, guy sitting by the beach, Gal shenitlesh ubaya bamsa, and all of a sudden this wave that detached itself from the ocean, and that wave has a boimsa. Technically, it really didn't need to have a 40 saw because a natural spring doesn't need 40 saw, But since it's not connected anymore to the ocean, they require that the wave itself, that detached itself from the ocean, needs 40 saw. And then v'nofal al ha'odem al kalim. It fell, let's say, on a man who's standing by the beach, or al kalim, or let's say a vessel that was tamei, and that wanted to become pure. Tahirin, it becomes pure. Now, Ketani, that's the Mishnah. So the Ketani dimya adam dimya dekalim. The Mishnah compares the way a man becomes pure to a keli becomes pure. Ma kalim, when kalim become pure with this well, with this ocean wave falling on it, the keli has no kavana. Of course, the keli can't think for itself, and yet it becomes tar. Af adam, so a man, he just be walking on the beach and without any kavana, and the wave falls on him, he would become tar. So we see a source that if you want to become pure for chulin, you don't need any kavana. So that's the proof. So the Gemara challenges that proof. Umamai, how do you know that's a good proof? Dilma, maybe that story with the guy walking on the beach is not that he's walking and not thinking about it. He's b'yoshev u'metzapa emasai yitola shagala. He's waiting when the wave will detach and fall on him. He's maybe in Hawaii where you have these massive waves, and he's purposely waiting for this wave to fall on him to become pure. And he really does have intention. And we're saying the opposite. The kalim dumya adam, that the vessel story that's by the beach is similar to the man. Ma adam the bar kabana, just like the person standing by the beach with intentions to find the wave to fall on him. Af kalim, the story of the kalim was the mechaven lahu, that the guy put it there specifically so that a wave will detach and fall on the kalim. So how do you know that it's talking about a case, a scenario where the guy did not have any intention to become pure? If that's the story, that a guy went to the beach and is waiting for a wave to come on him, so by Yoshev and Matzapa, if he's waiting and sitting there waiting for a wave to detach, my lememra, what is the novelty of this case in the Mishnah? I mean, a guy is waiting to go to fall, the water to fall on him. So why shouldn't he become tahar? I mean, what's the Mishnah trying to tell you? Answers the Gemara, I would have thought, maybe the guy will come to be toivel in a waterfall of rain. So let's say a waterfall, let's call this a waterfall of rain, all right? Falling off a mountain, right over here in the picture. So there is very different than the wave, because the wave is coming from the ocean. Here, it's rainwater that fell on a mountain, now falls on you. Rainwater always has to be in a mikveh, in one place. It can't be falling on a mountain, coming from a mountain, because that's not natural water, it's rainwater. And therefore, the requirement for that would be it had to be in a mikveh. It has to be in a pool. So therefore, if you allow this guy to become pure, he might come and say this, if I stand over here under a rainfall, coming from a mountain, I will also become pure. So let's say that a man may come to make that mistake. So let's not let you become tar if you stand next to the ocean. That's the novelty that of the Brisa, of the Mishnah, say we don't make such a gezerah. Iname, or another thing, I might think that being toiveled by the ocean, by that wave, nigza roshan atekipin. I might think that we can, if we allow him to become pure, he may come to think that even in the arch, you become pure. Let's take a look at the wave. The truth is that the only way to become pure is if you're standing by the aleph, right? If you're standing by this place, by the aleph. But if you throw the keli up by the arch, you don't become tar. It has to be on its way landing to you. It has to come to you. That's when you become pure. So I might think that we should be geyser, that you don't become pure by the head of the end of the wave, because you might come to think that you could purify yourself even if you're on the arch of the wave. So Kamash Malam, Deloy Gazrina, we don't make such gezeras. We don't make such far-fetched gezeras. And how do you know there's a difference between the arch and the head of of the wave. How do I know you can't toivel in the arch? The Tanya we learned in the Brisa, very simple. Matbilin, you're allowed to be toivel and become pure barushim in the end of the wave. The ein matbilin bechafin, you don't become tameh, you don't become pure in the arch. Lefi she'ein matbilin ba'aver, because that's a tvila in the airspace. That's if you throw something up, let's say you have a vessel, you want to be mitari a vessel, so you throw it up into the air so it should be into the water over here. It won't become pure. That's why it won't work. The only way it could work is when the water lands on you from the ocean and just lands on you while you're standing on the ground. That's can it work. So the Gemara just rejected the source of over here that you would need kavana by chulin, because perhaps that case where the wave is talking about a case where the man did have kavana to have tvila. So how do I know, again, where is the source that if you're trying to purify yourself for chulin, you don't need kavana? We note from this case that now we learned in the Mishnah. Now here's the case. Just one hakdama. We know that if you pick an apple off the tree, and even if a sheretz touches that apple, right, a rodent, a dead sheretz, it wouldn't become tameh. Why? Because in order for something to become tameh, you really need hechsher kalim. You need hechsher. It has to be. It has to have water coming on it first. Then, once water came on it, then it's susceptible. The apple becomes susceptible to tumah. And the only time water coming on the apple makes it susceptible to tumah is only if on purpose you put water onto that apple. But if it by accident water came on the apple, it's still not susceptible to tumah. That's the basic hakdama. So elam now we learned it over here.
What animal did you say touches the apple?
The Chumash says that there are 8 rodents that die. Let's take one, a weasel or a rat. Okay, that dies.
A
sheretz. That's called a sheretz. So then, if it touches, then the Torah says that if an apple would touch that sheretz, it becomes tameh.
Got it.
But only if the apple had water that came on it first, that you purposely put water on the apple. So now you made the apple susceptible to tumah. So now the Mishnah says, Perish shenaflu l'soich amas mayim. Let's say you have a basket of fruit and you're walking and it fell into a pool of water. So you didn't want it to fall into water. It was by accident. Upashat mi shiyadav tameas unatalam. A guy who was tameh wanted to take the apples out of the pool, the swimming pool. So he stuck his hand, which were tameh, his hands were tameh, and took the apples out of the pool. So then yadav tahiris, his hands become tahar, even though he had no intention to wash his hands, by just putting your hands in the water, automatically you become tahar. So right away you can see that this Mishnah is a source that you don't need intention when you're coming to mitar your hands for chulin. You don't need your intentions. Uperis, the fruits, are not susceptible to tumah because they fell into the water by accident. So then it's not susceptible to tumah. But the im bishvil sheyutchu yadav, if you, let's say, threw the peris into the water, and then you wanted to use it to wipe your hands down, to fetch the water and fetch the fruit from the swimming pool, and by definition, to make I guess you wanted the fruits to fall into the water. Then, of course, yadav taharis, your hand become tahar. But peris harehi b'chiyutan. The fruits are b'chiyutan, means that the fruits are now susceptible to tumah because you wanted them to fall into the water. But you see that when they fell in by accident, the peris are not susceptible to tumah, but by sticking your hand, even you didn't really want to stick your hand into the swimming pool, automatically your hands become tahar. So we see from there that you don't need special intention to purify your hands to eat chulin. So the Gemara asks, Eisvei Rabba Rab Nachman. Rabba asked Rab Nachman, our Mishnah said, Hatoiva lechulin, if you go to the mikveh for chulin, v'huchzat lechulin, you're always thinking about, I'm going to become pure for chulin, also lemaiser. You're not allowed to eat meiser. But here, the Brisa Mishnah, our Mishnah says, "Huchsek en." You have to be thinking about you're eating chulim. It's not like you just walked into a mikveh not knowing what you're doing. You have to be thinking about chulim. Loy huchsek. But if you didn't think about that you're going to eat chulim, loy, it wouldn't work. So that just our Mishnah is a difficulty to that statement that you don't need kavana for chulim. So the Gemara says no. The Mishnah, you have to read it this way. Hachi kamar. Even though you're thinking about chulim, also the ma'aser, you're not eating ma'aser. In other words, for chulim, you don't even have to think about anything. You automatically become tar l'chulim. But even if you're thinking about chulim, still, and you went to the mikveh, for this midrabanan, you're still considered tameh, and you can't eat ma'aser sheni. Esvei, I'll ask you another question from our Mishnah. The Mishnah says, our Mishnah said, Taval v'loy huchzak, ki'ilu loy taval. And if you go to the mikveh and you don't think about anything, it's as if you didn't go to the mikveh. In other words, you didn't even know. You thought you're going into a swimming pool, right? A gym, a swimming pool. You didn't know it's a mikveh. The Mishnah says it's as if you didn't go to the mikveh. My love, doesn't our Mishnah mean ki'ilu loy taval klal? It's as if you didn't go to the mikveh at all. So the Gemara says, loy, it's not true. Rab Nachman answered Rabba, it's ki'ilu loy tova l'maiser. What the Mishnah means, it's as if you didn't do tefillah for maiser, aval tova l'chulin. It works for chulin. So even if you got fooled into this, somebody brought you into a place and told you it's a swimming pool, and you went in and you didn't know it's a mikvah, and you got out, you automatically become tar, even if you didn't think you were becoming tar. It just automatically works. So who savar Rab Nachman? Rabba thought Rab Nachman just pushing him off, not really proving himself. Nafik. So Rabba went and researched this. Is it true that for chulin you don't need any kavana? Dak, he was meticulous. The Ashkech, and he found another source, a brisa, an unknown brisa. And here it's very clear in the brisa. The Tanan we learned in the brisa. Taval, guy goes to the mikvah. V'loy huchsek, didn't think about anything. Also, la ma'aser, he's not allowed to eat ma'aser. He had no kavana. But b'mutar l'chulin, he's mutar to eat chulin, because for chulin you don't need to have any intention. I want to point you out something very important, and that is like this: what the Gemara is coming to the conclusion is to go to the mikvah, you don't have to have kavana. Now, there is a halacha that when you when you buy a kalim from a goy, you have to put it into the mikvah, right? You have to toivel it in the mikvah before you can use it. So we see that for going to the mikvah, especially if it's only being used for chulin purposes, you don't need kavana. So there is a lot of Pesach programs that before the Pesach program, they buy a lot of new kalim, a lot of new dishes and glasses. So it's very difficult to have a Jew just sit there by the mikvah. So what they do is they have Mexicans or whatever, people who are working for the program, but they're goyim, and they're the ones being toivel the kalim into the mikvah, because the point is that you don't really need kavana, and therefore you could actually have a goy. If you have a lot of kalim to toivel, you're allowed to hire a guy to help you toivel the kalim into the kalim mikvah. Although when they have these types of cases, they have usually the mashgiach will start them off by making a bracha, toivel a few kalim, and then the goyim take over and start toiveling kalim into the mikveh with the mashgiach looking over. But you don't really need a Jew, because based on our Gemara, you don't really need a kavana when you're trying to purify something or send something into mikveh for chulin. Look at the Gemara, new Gemara, Amar Rab Lazar. Let's say a guy knows he's going into the mikveh, but didn't think about whether he's going for chulin, kachim, chatas, or meiser. He didn't think about anything, but he knows he's going into the mikvah. Till now, we were discussing he didn't know he's going into the mikvah. Now we're discussing if he knows he's going into the mikvah. Taval, guy went to the mikvah, va'ala, and he went out of the mikvah, and he knows he's toiveling in the mikvah. Then he could decide, even after he left the mikvah, he could decide if he wants to use it for meiser or truma or kachim. You can decide later on what you want to use that tvila for. So you can decide later on. So the Gemara asks, Meisvei, I'll ask you a question. A guy didn't leave the mikveh yet. He has still 1 foot in the water. right? And having 1 foot in the water is almost like you're in the mikvah, because we assume that all the water that's on your body is somehow connected to the mikvah that you're with your foot on the last step of the mikvah. So huchzak l'davar kal, if you decided that you want to, let's say for a light thing, you were thinking about eating meiser, you could change your mind as long as 1 foot is in the mikvah. You could change your mind and say, you know what, I want to use it for truma. But Allah, once you leave the mikvah, shuv eina machzik, you can't change your mind. So my love, eina machzik klal, you can't change your mind for anything. And therefore, once you leave a mikvah, and even if you didn't decide what you wanted it won't work anymore. So this is a question against Rab Lazar, who said that if you left the mikvah, you could always decide later on what you want. So the Gemara says, "Loi, you have to understand it this way. Oidehu, if you're in the mikvah, 1 foot is in the mikvah, afal pi shehuchzak, even though you decided, let's say you want meiser, machzek, you could change your mind, make it truma. Allah, but if you left the mikvah, so here's what we're talking about. If you didn't have any kavana, you knew you're going into the mikvah, you didn't decide what, and you actually left the mikvah, machzik, you could decide later on. Because since you had no kavana of what it is, you could actually decide later on. But if you decided in the mikvah, let's say you wanted only meiser, then you can't change your mind. Eina machzik, because you made a decision in the mikvah. So when you leave the mikvah, you can't change your mind anymore. So what Rab Lazar was talking about, a guy made no decision. He knows he's going into the mikvah, but he didn't decide what he wants to use it for. So then, even if he left the mikvah, he can still decide later on what it is. But to change your mind, if you decided on one thing, that you can't do once you leave the mikvah. So the Gemara just wants to point out, we discussed that if your foot is still in the morning in the water, you could change your mind. If your foot is still in the water, you could change your mind. Why? Who says that source? Who's the source that says that if you have 1 foot in the mikvah, you could change your mind? Amar Apadas, Rabbi Yehudi. That is the source of this Rabbi Yehuda that holds that if you have 1 foot in the mikvah, it's as if your whole body is in the mikvah. The Tanah we learned in this Mishnah. Mikvah shenimdad. Let's say you have a mikvah, they measured it, and it's precisely v'yesh bayabam saw muchvanas. It is exactly 40 saw. If it loses 1 ounce, it would be a pasul of mikvah. Now, v'yardu shnayim, 2 people go down, v'tovlu zeh chazeh, and 1 toivel. Now, when the first guy leaves, he already took some water out of the mikvah. So harishan tahar, the first guy becomes tahar. Vasheni is going, the second guy that goes into this mikvah, he's probably going into a mikvah that's missing 40 saw, so he's tameh. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, but Rabbi Yehuda says, he makes a caveat. Im hoya raglav sharishan noigais b'mayim af hasheni tahar. If the foot of the first person is still touching the water, even the second guy is tahar. Take a look at the picture. The picture here's the picture, right over here. That the guy is, let's just back it out. Here. This one guy is in the mikvah, one guy still has his feet in the mikvah. So since he has his feet in the mikvah, even though he has water all over his body, Rabbi Yehuda says we consider the water all over his body is good aches. Means we connect it down to the mikvah as if he's in the mikvah. So although technically if I measure the mikvah, it has only 39 saw, but we count the water that's on this guy's body as if it's connected to the mikvah, and this guy becomes tar. So said Rabbi Yehuda. So there we see that Rabbi Yehuda makes a distinction that if you're touching the water, it's considered as if you're still in the mikvah. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba Baravua. And that's why Rabbi Yehuda probably will hold that if you're still touching the mikvah with your feet, you can change your mind and decide what the purification should be for. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba Baravua, Machloikis b'malas the Rabbanim. The Machloik is whether the Rabbanim disagree with Rabbi Yehuda, even with your foot in the mikvah, if you're being toivel because the Rabbanan told you to be toivel. Like what we're discussing over here, there's certain times the Rabbanan said, I want you to go to the mikvah. So it's the Rabbanan stuff. We say, Rabbi Yehuda says, if your foot is still touching the water, you're still connected. But the Chachamim are very strict. Even for a truma, even for a reason of a rabbanan, you're going to the mikvah, they still says that this doesn't work. So this idea that you have to have kavana when you're going to the mikvah, if you're going to go meiser or truma or for kachim, it's really only the rabbanan. So even so, only Rabbi Yehuda will hold that if your foot is still in the mikvah, you can change your mind. Aval matumid l'tahara, but real tumah, if you're real tameh and you're trying to tar, if you're doing doraisa stuff, then Rabbi said, Divrei Hakol, even Rabbi Yehuda would agree that af hasheni tameh, the sheni is tameh, the second guy, not the second guy is tameh, because the first guy took out the water. So that's behind the Rapos. That's what Rapados wanted to say, that this fact that you could change your mind is only Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda is the only one that's lenient with your foot in the water. Rabbi Yehuda is the only one that could be lenient with that. But Ika de Amre, others say that even the Rabbanim are sometimes lenient with your foot in the water. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rav Barbu, Machlekes Betumah L'Tahara. When is the Rabbanim strict that having the second guy's foot in the water, feet in the water, makes him connected to the mikvah, is only by deraisa things. They're very strict that it doesn't work. Aval b'malas d'Rabbanim, if you're dealing with inyani d'Rabbanim, mikvah that you're only required to go into the mikvah midrabbanim, and stuff like our intention, you need kavana. So then divrei hakol, everybody would agree that af asheni tar, even the second guy would be tar. In other words, having the feet in the mikvah connect you to the mikvah. So then, even the Rabbanan could agree to the concept of feet in the mikvah connects you to the mikvah. Or Peligi de Rapadas, this would disagree with Rapadas said that the only one that held of this concept was Rabbi Yehuda. And we see, according to the Ikadiyame, that there are times that if you're dealing with Rabbanans, even the Rabbanan would accept the concept of having your foot in the mikvah. Makes you part of the mikvah. Again, this all concerns with what we said before. The guy's feet is in the mikvah, and he decided he wanted it for Meiser, but while his feet in the mikvah, on his way out, he wants to change his mind. Since his foot is connected to the mikvah, he can still, it's as if he's still in the mikvah, and he could change his mind for another, to make it even a higher level of purification. Amar Ula, they asked from Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yehuda ma'u lahatbil mechmachta mitzinoris b'roisha shal rishon. Very interesting question. You're telling me that this second guy, this first guy, he's number one, right, is still considered in the mikvah. Can you put, let's say, pins and needles on his head that you want to purify? Let's say there's water on his head, and you consider him as if he's part of the mikvah. So if you consider him that the water on his body is connected to the mikvah downwards, would you consider that the mikvah water is connected to this guy going upwards? So technically, you don't have to put the pins and needles in the mikvah. You could put it on the top of his head. Let's say, why would a person do that? Why don't you put it in the mikvah? He's afraid it's going to float away. It's gold or something like that. So he wants to put it on his head and consider that as if he put it into the mikvah, because you would say, good asik. So you would say as if, so the Gemara says, that's the question. Good achas is laid Rabbi Yehuda. Does Rabbi Yehuda only say that the water on the first guy goes into the mikvah? But good asik leislate. But having the mikvah water come up to the guy, that's not, that we don't imagine that to be. Oidilma, or maybe Rabbi Yehuda doesn't make any distinction. Good asik nama islay. He would say that we imagine the mikvah water just going over the guy's head, even though he's just standing with his feet in the mikvah. Amalei, so Rabbi Yochanan responded to Nisa, I have another Mishnah that proves the concept that you would say it. Because look at this case. Here's the case right here on this side. You have three mikvahs. One that has on the bottom here, it says number 20. And then you have a mikvah in the middle that has 40 saw. So the only one that's really kosher is the middle one. And then the top one is 20. But there's water that connects all three mikvahs. There's like a water flow that connects them all. So can you be toivel on the 20 mikvah? You certainly can be toivel on the bottom one, because we consider as if the mikvah that has 40 saw is in the 20 saw mikvah. But would you say the opposite direction, that it flows upwards? So there's a Breshna that says, Shalish gamamiyas benachli, you have three holes on a cliff. Hel yoina v'tachtoin v'emtsois. Hel yoina, the top one, v'tachtoin, and the bottom one, shel esem saw, has 20 saw in it. So it's really not kosher. V'emtsois shel aboim saw. The middle one has 40 saw. V'chadola shel gasham oiveres b'neim. And there's rainwater that connects all three of them. Rabbi Yehuda oimer, Rabbi Yehuda would say, Meir hoya oimer matril be'el yoina. You're allowed to be toivel in the top one, because we consider that the middle one, the one with the 40 saw, is connected to the top one. And we reverse gravity, and we imagine that the 40 saw goes up into the 21 to the top guma, to the top hole. So we see, we can, according to Rabbi Yehuda, you can go backwards, even upwards also, against gravity. So we see that that's clearly Rabbi Yehuda will hold that. So the Gemara answers, that's not true. Ula said it's not true because I found that Rabbi Yehuda would not agree with that concept. For Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, Rabbi Yehuda said, we go to Ahmed Beis, Meir Hoya Omer, Meir used to say, Matbil Be'el Yoina, you could be toivel in the top one. Va'ani Omer, but Rabbi Yehuda, myself say, B'tachtoin V'loi Be'el Yoina, you can only toivel in the bottom one, the bottom hole, not V'loi Be'el Yoina, not the top one. So we see you could only say good asik. You could only say the water goes towards gravity, but not in the opposite direction. And Rabbi Yehuda would not say good asik. Amalei itanya time. If that's the case, you're right. And that would be the case that if a guy puts the pins and needles on top of the head of this guy, we will not say good asik as if the water mikveh came over this person's head. Now the Mishnah, just one last point. Let's take a minute and we'll stop. The Mishnah said that a toivel l'chulin, you have to be toivel for chulin, you become chulin. But you're not kosher for maser. And then if in order to be kosher for maser, you have to have in mind that you're going to eat ma'aser sheni. If you toivel for maser, you're not kosher until you eat truma. If toivel for truma, you're not kosher until you have in mind that you want to eat kachim, etc., etc. There are 5 levels of kavana: chulin, ma'aser, truma, kachim, and chatas. That's what we learned in the Mishnah. So the Gemara says, Mani Masnisin. Who is our Mishnah? Rabbanan he. At the end of the Mishnah, it seems our Mishnah goes according to, and the beginning of the Mishnah goes according to Rabbanan. The Shanu Luhu, because Rabbanan say, Bein Chulin L'Maiser. There's a difference between Chulin and Maiser. That means if a man is Tomei, he's a Sheni L'Tuma. Let's say a man is Sheni L'Tuma. How did he become a Sheni? By eating Tomei food. So now he's a Sheni. Number 2. He can eat Chulin, but he can't eat Maiser. So Rabbanan say that Maiser Sheni, Maiser is on a higher level than Chulin. So that's why you have 5 distinctions in the beginning of the Mishnah. So that makes sense that you say our Mishnah goes according to Rabbanan, but not Rabbi Meir, because Rabbi Meir does not have a distinction between Chulin and Maiser. He holds they're both equal. Aim a Sefer, but then look at the Sefer of the Mishnah. Big day Amoritz, the clothing of an Amoritz. He swears that he's tahar. Medris is considered tamei la perushin for somebody who wants to eat chulin betahara. Perushin are people. There's no avera to eat, chulin betuma. If I want to eat my apple and I know it's tamei, there's no problem with that. But there were some people who are considered more pious, and they wanted to eat everything that they put in their body should be totally pure. So when they come to an Amoritz and touch his, let's say his suit, that he becomes Tameh, because even though the Amoritz says I'm Tar, for a Perushim, he is Tameh. Big day Perushim, but even the clothes of somebody who's a pious person, Medres, he's a Tameh, he's considered Tameh, La'ikli Truma. For a Kohen that wants to eat Truma, if he touches a Parush's clothing, he becomes Tameh, right? Because the Kohen that's eating Truma, he's even on a higher level. He's eating something more severe. But notice how the Mishnah jumps from Chulin to Truma. And then it goes from Truma, if you read the end of the Mishnah, it goes from Truma to Kachim to Haris. So Asen, that end of our Mishnah goes according to Rab Meir, that there is no distinction between Chulin and Maisa. The Amar who said Chulin and Maisa, Kahadodininu, they're on the same level. Chulin and Maisa are on the same level. There's no holiness difference between eating Chulin and Maisa Sheni food. So would you say Reisha Rabbanan, the beginning of our Mishnah is a Rabbanan, the Seif and the end of the Mishnah is Rab Meir? That's odd to say that there are 2 authors for one Mishnah. That's odd. So the Gemara first tries and says, and you must say that, yes. And sometimes if you have no choice, you have to say this concept. Reisha Rabbanan, the beginning of the Mishnah is Rabbanan, that there is a distinction between Chulin and Maisa, and there are 5 levels. The Sefer Rab Meir, and the end of our Mishnah goes according to Rab Meir. And Rav Acha Bar Ada gives the final teretz. Even our end of a Mishnah goes according to It goes according to Rabbanan that there are 5 distinctions. You have to put words into the Mishnah at the end of the Mishnah saying that the Mishnah is also talking about Meiser. So you'll say Big Day Perushin is Tameh to people who eat Meiser. And Big Day people who eat Meiser are Tameh for people who eat Truma. So actually, even though it doesn't say it in the Mishnah, you have to put that in. So again, our Mishnah is the Rabbanan, and there are 5 separate distinction of holy type of eating. Chulin, which is the lowest level, Meiser Sheni, Truma, Kachim, and if you want to work with Paraduma waters, that's if you want to touch Paraduma waters, or if you want to touch Kachim, that's the next level. Truma is the lower, and Meiser Sheni and Chulim, those are the 5 levels. And our Mishnah has one author, which is the Rabbanan. Okay, we shall stop over